welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. This is a podcast dedicated to educating and empowering women from preconception, pregnancy, birth, and through early motherhood on wellness lifestyle. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and I'm a maternity pediatric chiropractor and mother who has hand-selected experts in natural holistic healthcare specialties to shine light on options and choices during this exciting phase of a woman's life. And today I had the opportunity to interview Kelly Van Zandt to speak on her book, Powerful Postpartum. And we had a wonderful conversation about how powerful it is for women to go through the transition into motherhood. So let me tell you about Kelly. Kelly Van Zandt is a Vedic counselor and a graduate student studying marriage and family therapy who supports mothers through their transition into motherhood. Kelly believes that becoming a mother is a transformational moment of a woman's life, and she highlights the potential for spiritual growth in the postpartum season. In her book, Powerful Postpartum, Kelly presents a fresh and empowering perspective on early motherhood as a major life event filled with personal growth and inner discovery. You can find more at her website at powerfulpostpartum.com. Hi, Kelly. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I'm very excited about today's topic. It's powerful postpartum. I've done a lot of postpartum episodes on Well-Adjusted Mama, but we're diving deep today on this episode because we're really talking about the amazing growth that occurs as a woman transitions into motherhood. And I would even say probably multiple motherhoods, right? So, each birth, right, is going to create a different version of that mother. And there's more growth and spiritually, emotionally, whatnot that can occur during that fourth trimester period. So talk to me a little bit about your background of how you became so passionate about speaking to this topic. And I'm assuming by postpartum, are you referring to those first 3 months after birth?
I'm referring to an undetermined amount of time after giving birth.
Okay.
Sort of hesitant to apply any specific time frame as definitively postpartum because I think it lasts a little longer than some might have us believe. And some might even say postpartum lasts forever.
Sure. It technically does.
In my experience, I felt as though I was in a postpartum season for at least 2 years after having my first. I felt at that point I sort of started emerging from the submarine a bit. But yes, loosely define the time after giving birth, whatever that means for you.
Okay.
Yeah. So I moved to New York City and found God, which is a strange thing that I feel most people wouldn't say. But I grew up in a pretty traditional religious household. And when I moved to New York City, I sort of expanded my experience and my understanding of a spiritual life. And I was exposed to really beautiful and powerful Eastern teachers. And I would sit in meditation spaces and I did all of this work, and some of which was beautiful, some of which was grueling, but that led me up to motherhood. So I went into motherhood feeling really confident, really prepared. I have done this work. I am ready. I can handle this. And when I had my first baby, I said, oh my word, I do not have this. I was totally shook. I was completely surprised by the magnitude of the experience of being a mom. And while I have to say I had a beautiful birth experience, I was able to nurse my baby without any complications, really. We bonded well. We were co-sleeping. All the external things that we're told to prepare for went quite well. However, I personally was feeling flatlined, and most alarmingly spiritually flatlined. Whereas the teachers I would have turned to in the past, either they themselves were not mothers or they were not speaking to the phenomenon of motherhood. And I really felt as though I was just floored that no one in the spiritual wellness community was talking about this huge phenomenon that is becoming a mother.
Yes.
What it entails and what it goes through. So it took me a while to really come to any sense of clarity because there was nothing on the external world that I could connect with. And I really felt like I had to go to that internal search. And it's about 6 months.
How many years ago was that?
So my son was born 2014. And I think it sort of preceded this conversation around matrescence and maternal mental health that we're evolving and improving now. But so that would have been 8 years ago. So it was about 6 months that it really took some deep soul searching to come to this realization that everything I had done prior to motherhood in terms of connecting with a higher sense of self and acknowledging the masks of persona and ego identification and really connecting with this higher self or in highest essence was exactly what was happening seemingly in motherhood. And that, I was experiencing sort of this shift in identity, and I couldn't understand how all of these parts of myself were falling away, yet I didn't perish, and I felt I was coming to really understand myself in a much deeper sense than I had ever really known. So that's what prompted this. And it took me about 6 years to complete the book, because that's life with young children, right?
Yes, it is. I'm still working to complete my book.
Godspeed. Yes, it's a task.
It's a task.
It's a task. Yeah. So then that's evolved. I released the book about 2 years ago, and now I work as a Vedic counselor. So I work one-on-one to support mothers, and I'm actually doing a graduate program in marriage and family therapy, so I can work with families as well at some point. So,
what is a Vedic counselor?
Yeah, so Vedic counselor basically looks at the philosophy behind yoga. So a lot of times we think of yoga as the asana, which is the physical posture, but there's a whole philosophical arm behind yoga. And without getting too complicated, I resonate with it personally because it is a study that does acknowledge the sense of the highest self. And so whereas traditional psychotherapy might be more about social adjustment or focusing on working with thoughts and emotions to adjust to society, Vedic counseling certainly doesn't ignore that, but it always keeps in mind this sense of awareness and the development of awareness and higher consciousness.
Okay. So when you're working with a woman, you start during the pregnancy, ideally, or you wait till after birth?
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, the continuity of care is ideal, to have a support system set up to take you through that process. And that's beautiful work. I think we can see in the doula community, for example, if you have a birth doula that can support you postpartum, all the studies have shown that that's really beneficial for new moms. So yeah, certainly that is a possibility. But I think oftentimes in motherhood, much like my own experience, you don't know until you know.
Right. And you don't know until after the fact. And then you're like, oh, I need support. I need somebody on my team. Mm-hmm. And so they would reach out to you, and you're providing like a counseling session. Walk us through what that looks like for a new mom.
Providing support for the mother. So for me, it's, postpartum is interesting because a lot of times when you hear the word postpartum, you automatically think depression. The two words have become associated.
Yes.
And now we're understanding there are other things to consider, different postpartum mood disorders or postpartum anxiety, postpartum OCD, all of these. So, the field is expanding a bit and our understanding is expanding a bit. However, it's my stance that even if a mother doesn't necessarily feel as though she's depressed or anxious or having some clinical issue, there's still a major life event that's happening, an adjustment to a major life event that can use support through that adjustment,
Yeah.
So I sort of work in that realm. If a mother's experiencing something more severe, certainly it's my job to refer her in a more clinical setting. But my support role is more about the adjustments that happen in motherhood that are certainly every mother is going to have her own nuances, but some of this is universal and it's undiscussed. So bringing it to the forefront, having a space to express freely and honestly and authentically this experience with someone who's well-versed in postpartum studies, who is a mom and has, this greater focus on you and your personal development.
Right. What are the universals?
Interesting. So one of the things that I find interesting, and it's that a mother often enters motherhood in a state of dichotomy. So her heart awakens typically. There's an immense feeling of love that happens in motherhood, but at the same time, she's experiencing a sense of loss. And the loss can be hard to acknowledge: a loss of freedom, a loss of autonomy, a loss of identity, time, organizational skills, a lot of things.
Money.
Yes, money, resources, power, all kinds of things can come
All
up.
kinds.
All kinds of things. And so that can be a tricky place for a mother to navigate. It's a very confusing thing to feel both of those things at once. And it is true in a sense that it's not necessarily a dichotomy, but it's more of a paradox that both of these things do exist at the same time. And
yes,
the way I like to look at it is that this is a phenomenon that is awakening your heart. Certainly, you are feeling these profound senses, probably stronger than ever before, of love and connection and joy. And at the same time, your active mind is becoming engaged, right? So we know when you become a mother, those senses go off for protection, and we become more aware of our environments and all these things. So both happen at once, and we sort of scientifically know this now. This is not just a concept, but in my opinion, if you consider both of those things happening at the same time, from a universal or a spiritual principle, the universe, the divine, wants us to feel safe, to feel love, to feel connected, to feel peace. But it's not that we can bypass the mind to get there. We have to go through all of those elements of the mind. And when we start to have a mental clarity of mind, and an awakened heart, that's the mind-heart connection. And that's when our actions arise spontaneously without conflict. And it's interesting because this is a very deep esoteric teaching that plays out, for example, in The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy goes into the world of color, a whole brand new world. And she meets in order, the characters that are the mind, the scarecrow, the Tin Man, the heart, and the lion is the action, right? And it's her job to align these pieces of herself as she goes through this journey to find home. Because it's a walk home. You're returning to your highest essence, to your truest self. So, these concepts are played out in stories. Esoteric meaning is rich around us. And it seems as though that's exactly what's playing out within the four walls of a new mother's home.
Right. So she's walking this journey, like this new life, right? Like it's really, you're transformed on the other side. And, it could take probably weeks or even months for a woman to kind of be like, get out of that Groundhog Day, like right after birth. And then to really even have an awareness about, like you said, connecting these things. You're almost on autopilot in the beginning, right? It's survival. It feels much more survival, which is hard to then have that growth opportunity.
And that's why I struggle to put the time frame on the postpartum period, is because it does take a while. Because you're right. And initially, and most obviously, we're prepared to have a learning adjustment and a learning curve to care for our baby.
Yes.
We have to learn this new task.
Yes.
And that takes some time, and it's a moving target because they keep changing over time.
They keep changing. You figure it out, and then they're different. And you're like, wait, I just knew what to do with you.
Exactly. And that's another lesson, right? All of life is change. All of life is growth. But yeah, it does sort of take some time for you to realize, hold on, this baby is developing. I'm developing as quickly as this baby in arms, but it takes some time. And I call it actually the slow, wide U-turn, because your attention at some point your gaze kind of leaves the external world and really goes to the internal world. And you see, postpartum has a strange way of just showing you all that you hold within. It's showing you that outer mind. And I really believe it can be, if accepted, it can be our task to clear some of that, to work on that clarity of mind, because anything we need to heal, we certainly need, what is it? In order to be healed, it has to be revealed or something like that. We have to see it first.
We have to be aware. So that's an interesting, you kind of, I agree that children and babies are like our mirror, right? They're reflecting back to us where we need to grow ourselves. It has nothing to do with them. They're just that mirror, right?
Yeah.
But you're also saying the experience of motherhood is also a mirror. Can they both be mirroring to us where our growth opportunities are?
I think so. And I think it comes up a lot in just our concept of motherhood and our expectations of motherhood. And hopefully I'm answering this question in the way that you were intending. One of my teachers, my mentor, taught me the most basic concept that I sort of live by. And that is that the root of conflict often lives in the gap between expectation and reality. So the root of conflict lives in the gap between expectation and reality. And I think that as mothers, we go into motherhood with a whole lot of external messaging and imagery around what motherhood looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we also really hope that we're going to be a certain type of mother. I think some of this is internally that we bring this with us in this motherhood experience. And I think that oftentimes in motherhood, like I said before, we don't know until we know. And we find ourselves in this moment where everything we thought about motherhood is really not exactly the actual experience. And there's sort of a coming to terms with just that. And what does that bring up for you? And
that is a big thing, by the way. I would say that's universal. So for a woman listening to this who's like, what the hell are you talking about? Because let's say she's a first-time pregnant mom, right? And she is not yet given birth and held her baby, but she's very clear about being an amazing, loving mother with all, like you mentioned, like the lifestyle choices of co-sleeping and breastfeeding and baby wearing and all the stuff, right? Which are really beautiful. And it's amazing to have that information to even know like what options and choices you have that may even be different than mainstream, right? They're unique because you've done your research and homework. But now a few months later, you're actually holding this baby and there can be challenges that happen, right? Like there could be challenges with breastfeeding. You want to breastfeed your baby, but it's not working well for XYZ reason. And that can create a lot of stress for this mom who's already stressed with trying to figure out motherhood. And now is like almost putting additional stress on herself because of these expectations, right? That she's held for herself. So what is a woman to do?
Yeah, I mean, the first and most important step is always awareness. It's always awareness of I came in with this expectation and now my reality is not meeting my expectation, right? Because if we're not aware of that gap, then that conflict will continue to fuel us and fuel our decisions. So that's the opposite of having the heart-mind connection where action is happening, out of conflict. So when conflict is arising and we're acting out of conflict, we just perpetuate it. So the first step is really just being aware that there is a gap here. This is not what I expected. This is not what I planned for. And it's easier said than done. But how do we start to, if not close the gap, get those two pieces a little bit closer together, right?
Yes.
Where we're approaching this in more of a realistic sense. And it's not the easiest thing because there is entirely too much noise around motherhood, right? There's entirely too much noise from the external world around motherhood and what it should look like. I say all the time, mothers are shitting all over themselves,
Yes.
And the truth is that no two mothers are going to have the exact same experience. And that's the most crucial part about coming to know yourself, really coming into your truth and your highest essence, is that as a byproduct of that, you start validating your choices and you start being clear about your family and what works for you. And that is tremendously freeing for a mother who's trying to check all the boxes, right? And it's interesting because I think another universal element of motherhood is this validation. So we go most of our lives in a school setting or a job or a career or whatever it might be, and we're constantly met with external validation, be it a grade, a pat on the back from our boss, a monetary raise, a formal review process, all of these things. And you get into motherhood and you are facing a challenge and a responsibility, quite possibly for the first time in your life, with no source of external validation. No one's coming to give you a pat on the back. Your neighbor's not coming over at the end of the day putting a gold star on your board. And that can be, that alone, that adjustment can be tremendously difficult for women, especially women who are used to autonomy and achievement and those sorts of things, you know? And that's another one. Like, so what do you do? Like, same thing as the gap between expectation and reality. What do you do? Well, you notice it. First thing you do is notice it. You say, oh, there I am seeking validation again from my husband, from my partner, from my mother, from my aunt, from my sister, from my friend, whoever it might be. You catch it. Because as soon as you can catch a patterning in your life that you are unaware of, it's not that it goes away, but it holds less robotic control over you. It sort of loses its charm when you can catch it because it just offers you an alternative. You know what I mean? Like they say this in the Yoga Sutras. It's sort of like you have to bring awareness to your consciousness. Otherwise, your awareness thinks it is the consciousness. It thinks it is the patterning. You know, you have to bring awareness to your patterning. Once you become aware of your patterning, the patterning exists and you can watch it, right? And then it just holds less power over you. And again, these are all easier said than done sort of ideas. But, you know, we want often to make these processes to feel harder than they are, feel arduous. And they're not easy, but the concepts are quite simple, really.
Yes.
The concepts are simple. The practice
you know, for a woman listening and she's like, well, how am I supposed to become aware? I feel the easiest way is how are you feeling in your body right now? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling anxious? And your body is trying to tell you that there's something to become aware of that's creating those symptoms. Pain is another one. And there's an opportunity so for a new mom, it's like, okay, meditation sounds great, but how does a new mom meditate to get awareness around the root cause essentially of her dis-ease within her body?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So we have to consider all parts of ourselves. We have this physical body that can give us a lot of indications. You know, if we're not able to necessarily go straight to the thought patterns, we have our emotions that can guide us. We can watch our reactions to things, right? We can always scale our sense of calm or clarity in situations when we're going above average. That would be an indication to reflect or contemplate. But in terms of practice, that's really the tricky part, is that there's not a lot of time for mothers to have this separate practice of meditation or uninterrupted silence or anything. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like mothers are really asked to integrate, to walk the talk, to live like masters, like finding the calm in the busy marketplace, if you can use that visualization.
Yeah.
And so this is really challenging work because our kids are sort of relentless. If you're having a moment, you might not get that moment to have that moment at the time, right? So we're having, and I'm not denying anyone, if you can fit it in and you can carve out that time for independent practice, like please do it.
Yeah.
But it's also, you know, bringing that mindfulness into everyday activities. We like to think spiritual practice is, you know, a retreat at an ashram or a mountain. And it's like, well, the task of repetitively changing a diaper or all the things you do over and over and over again can be a sort of, and I know people are like recoiling and cringing as I say it, but we overlook the tasks at hand as separate from spiritual practice. And I think it is possible to, even in small degree, integrate into our everyday lives.
They are things that you don't have to consciously think about because you've done it so many times. You know, you and I were talking about commuting prior to the recording. You know, when you've done a commute long enough, you don't have to think, what exit do I take? You're on that autopilot, right? And autopilot is an opportunity to. So what does that look like, having a mindful practice while you're on autopilot with around your house and your, you know, day-to-day activities, essentially, that you don't have to be conscious of?
Yeah, it can look different ways for different people. I often catch myself doing the dishes thinking, do I have to be angry at everyone in my house while I do the dishes? Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, no one ever picks up. I'm the only one who does anything, that sort of thing. You watch
Why is somebody else not doing the dishes right now?
Can I just wash the dishes? Can I just be aware of the water in my hands? Can I change? Can I broaden that perspective? Even if I feel like I'm overworked and overdone, which most mothers, don't get me wrong, are taking on the mother load. I do know that. But can I broaden my perspective? Can I elevate my perspective as a service to my family? Here I am.
And can I ask for support? Are my kids old enough that they can help out a little bit more? Why is my husband in his massage chair right now?
If you're feeling martyrdom, what can you do to correct that? How can
right? Because that's not a healthy place to live.
Oh, certainly not. So it's those check-ins. It's the checking in with that dialogue, that constant dialogue that's running in our heads, checking in with how we're speaking to ourselves, checking in on our perspectives, how we're viewing things, how we're approaching things. And that's the thing with spiritual growth or personal growth. There's no finish line. This is not like, okay, I got it. I'm here. We're good. It just keeps going. Someone described it to me sort of like keys on a piano. Like you go up there's 7 keys is 1 octave, and then you start all over again on a higher octave. You just keep going. You just keep growing, and you're just becoming more and more aware. And as you expand that, or as you practice that or build that muscle of awareness, you start to expand your consciousness. You start to expand your limited perceptions and limited beliefs.
Right. So this is a practice. This is something that does require some effort, but the more we do it, the easier it gets, the easier the awareness. And then with the awareness, once you have that awareness, then it's easier to kind of switch, like you mentioned, the emotion or whatever's attached to how you're feeling, right? And shift your perspective, really, because that's really what life is all about. So one thing I think that's super powerful is as we're practicing this awareness and mindfulness during motherhood, we're modeling this for our children, even our newborns, right? Our newborns are witnessing what it looks like to be present. And what a powerful gift to give our children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And part of presence, I think, adds pressure to moms to be fully present, take it all in, enjoy it. We receive this messaging of enjoy every minute, that sort of thing. And my teachers always explain presence to me as just being fully aware of what is. If your mind is wandering to the past, to the future, presence means we're not battling with that, but we are aware of that, right? So constantly being in the moment is sort of a myth in some ways.
It's not realistic. Yes.
It's not realistic. Your mind's going to wander. You're going to dream. You have memories, of course, and it's just awareness is not necessarily about correcting yourself. It's just about seeing what's there, seeing all of this. It's almost like watching a Broadway show. When you start turning your focus inward, you can see all the different characters that are playing out in your own mind. Is sort of wild, but
or a soap opera.
Yes, exactly. But it is a powerful tool. And I'm sorry, I forgot where we started with that segment, but we were talking about the present. Oh, the present. Yes. But you're right. In terms of our children and what they're learning from us, the tape is running from a very young age, and kids.
Yeah. In utero, technically.
Oh gosh. And they're so perceptive. They're so very perceptive in a way that's nonverbal.
Correct.
They have an energetic, ability to perceive. And I don't like to normally add that pressure to moms because, I think moms are usually pretty hard on themselves, but it's absolutely true, and especially before the age of 7, it's sort of like an ounce of preaching is worth a pound of modeling. What you do in your state of being is so much more impactful than your lectures to those kids.
It is. That first 7 years, you're shaping your child's subconscious mind. And you're right. I don't want it to feel like a burden for young moms to be like, oh my God, I have to be perfect, because that's not realistic either. But to have an awareness, like I just want to give an example. Last night, I had a 21-week pregnant woman in my practice come in for care. And she has a 2-year-old toddler. And she's just like, oh, sleep's been really rough with my child because she doesn't want to sleep in her bed anymore. And she did. She was sleeping in her bed so well, up until recently. And I'm like, did she stop sleeping in her bed when you got pregnant? She's like, yes. And it was like this aha moment of connecting that timeline. And I'm like, well, your daughter is sensing another baby's on the way and has concerns about what that means. She won't be an only child. She's going to have to share her parents' attention, all the things that this little toddler brain is creating a story about, right? Which may or may not be true. But the unknown of it all, right? And it's funny because the mom's like, well, I don't really know what she understands, right? And it's like, well, yeah, she might not be speaking a lot, right? But children understand a lot more than we give them credit for. So all I could share with the mom was like, you just, talk to her about what's happening, because it is happening. And, anything that's positive and can help her feel safe and help her regulate her nervous system will help her with sleep, obviously.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. The next book I'm writing is called Your Baby, Your Guru, because I think in a lot of ways our kids are our mirrors and our kids do teach us. And so I would say what I hear in that situation too is that the child has an innate ability, even if she can't verbalize it, to find a way to honor her need for connection.
Yeah.
She needs to feel connected to that mom. And so she climbs into the bed, even if she can't put it all together and the mom can't put it all together, she is honoring and acknowledging her needs in that moment. And we could all take a lesson from that.
Right.
To say, this is what I need right now. And this is how I'm going to honor myself and do that. And I think you're right, because, going back to that piece about martyrdom, it's easy for moms to take on the mother load and do it all and put themselves aside. And so, there's always this, often in motherhood, the word selfless comes up, and it does get equated with martyrdom and self-sacrifice. And, there is certainly a moment in your life as an early mother that your baby's needs are going to come before your own. There is a little bit of reprioritization.
Yeah.
But I think that when we sort of reframe the ways we care for our kids as service, service is a universal spiritual that crosses all dogmas, faiths, and religions. And service has a way of moving you out of your own way. That's sort of how service works. It allows you to connect. But that does not equate to self-abandonment, and that does not equate to martyrdom. Right? That is not the same thing. And we think of a sense of spiritual selflessness, which means, the way I see it, is less self, less egoic self, and a connection with a higher self, and freedom from what we are not, and the embrace of who we truly are. That's sort of spiritual selflessness. That's a different thing. But I do think, in ways when we attune to our kids, they are showing us how to acknowledge and honor those things, those human things we need, like connection. And we can witness it again and again and again, especially as they get into the toddler age, for example, when you go from, the age 1.5 to 2 and the kids start saying no,
right.
We can see they're forming a sense of identity. They're learning discretion. They're learning how to, assert themselves. And it's challenging for a mom with a 2-year-old in the no phase. But, we can look at that and say, this is unapologetically a child developing a sense of self and developing a sense of boundary and all of that, so there's so many ways.
Independence.
Yeah.
Right. And so, it is interesting. And then, back to that child who's like, I need connection with my mom. I'm going to crawl into bed. And then mom's sleep is not optimal. Dad is out on the couch. How does a family essentially do what's in everybody's best needs and the family's needs at the same time? Like, how does that work in a family unit? Especially when some of the needs are out of alignment.
Yeah, it's really, really, really tricky. And first of all, the topic of sleep, I never will weigh in on. I know mothers who are surgeons who need to sleep. They rely on their manual dexterity for getting up and going to work in the morning. And everybody is going to approach sleep quite differently and what's right for their family. But I think not more important, because I know how challenging that sleep deprivation can be. It's will bring you to your knees. It's really grueling. And I'm not sure why that's even built into motherhood. That's a question I can't even answer. But anyway, how do we have that? But in this sense, I think it's more about acknowledging the child's effort for connection, and can we build that connection in other ways that might then impact the nighttime behavior potentially. I don't have all the answers in terms of that. That's really up to the family. But yeah, the sleep struggles are very real, very significant, and somewhat grueling.
Yeah. And the connection with mom, when it's a working mom, right? A mom who works out of the house, and the child, let's say, maybe doesn't see the mom for hours during the day, and then is trying to so how does that work too? Because that's challenging. Working out of the home moms and stay-at-home moms have different challenges. But do you have anything to weigh in on that?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think what comes to mind is the theory of attachment. I think it's Bowen's theory of attachment. And he basically summarizes that there's not a mammal on Earth who doesn't seek the care, comfort, and protection of its mother.
And not father per se, really very much mother oriented.
Yeah, I mean, fathers certainly play a role as well. But that maternal connection, just biologically speaking, from a mammalian perspective, is sort of ingrained in early life. And then, a lot of, not to get into parenting, but if you look at like Dan Siegel's work, for example.
Whole brain child.
Yeah. And there's one other whose name is escaping me, but, there is something called like the primal period where and the attachment theory as well goes to say that, our earliest senses of attachment in life carry through with us throughout a lifetime and show up in our friendships and our personal relationships and our romantic relationships and so on. So what does that look like? Creating a sense of, care, safety, and security, nurturing for the child. That could look different ways in different families. But again, it's a matter of just keeping that in your awareness set that biologically it's very normal for this child to seek connection and care. It's not out of the norm.
Yes.
It's actually them trying to survive and trying to make it through this life. So it's just a sort of perspective shift for the mom. And it's not about, this many hours or this technique. It's about holding that in awareness and meeting that need as best as you can, or what ways work for you.
And then also what was coming up to me is there's quality versus quantity in the time we spend with our children. So, when you're with your child, being really connected to them and not distracted with, I got to do this, or I got to send an email or whatever, but you're totally like present and connected to your child in that amount of time that you're able to give, right? Because we can't give all of our time, fully present and connected to our child. So make it count, right? Make those moments and times count together. I think that's the most impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's interesting when you look at the neuroscience around the maternal mind and how our brains adapt when we become mothers. The two, the baby and the mother, work cyclically as a circle together. So when the mother's feeling connected and bonded with the baby, the brain is then wiring for greater senses of empathy. And then that empathy leads to greater connection, and the connection leads to greater empathy. So it's not, often we view, I think, the relationship as me and I and them. And the relationship is really a we. It's very, very much the two working together. And the same thing happens when we care for our babies. We get that little dopamine hit
Mm-hmm.
It engages the reward system, and the reward system then motivates us to keep caring for our baby. And that's how it works. That's how we're wired. So a baby really isn't even in existence without its caregiver. It's reliant upon its caregiver. It's dependent upon its caregiver. So I really think motherhood, and this is also included in the book, motherhood does take us from an I perspective to a we perspective. And we get this sense of connection and connectivity sort of in the microcosm of our own home. And in my perspective, I think it's like a training ground where we see how deeply connected we are with our babies and how they're picking up on our state of being, and they're perceptive. And the two of us are sort of one in a big way. And then we can take that and expand that to say, well, truly we're one with our partners, we're one with our communities, we're one with all of creation. We're learning these lessons of oneness and connectedness with our babies. But I think it's a training ground so that we can expand our connectedness in general.
It is such a beautiful point. We are all connected. What about the concept of the dyad, mom and baby, being energetically most intimately connected that first 9 months postpartum? So the baby was growing, developing 9 months in utero. Now they're born. And obviously there's a connection after those 9 months. But what about those first 9 months postpartum? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it is around 9 months where the baby doesn't even necessarily know they're a separate being from the mom. And the baby thinks it's mom's arm or whatever it is, and I think that often, mothers are surprised by that phenomenon. A lot of times moms think after I have this baby, my body's going to feel like my own again. And they can be really surprised by how physical motherhood is. A lot of mothers are, often touched out by the end of the day. But beyond that physical connection, it's a strange sense of, oh, I went into the baby's room because I felt like they woke up from their nap. And indeed, they had woken up from their nap. Like there is a sense of inexplicable connectedness you have with your child. Not always, but sometimes. And I think that a lot of times mothers aren't really prepared for that or surprised by that. And again, it's something hard to explain to someone until they've experienced that. But, I think a lot of the things we know now in terms of the biology of motherhood and the science of becoming a mother really does support these ideas. For example, when the baby's born, their vision doesn't extend beyond 12 inches. Which if you're holding your baby is just far enough for them to gaze at your face as you're holding them. So, their concept of reality really doesn't extend far past you.
Right.
They come from your tummy that is, you're fully surrounded, you're omnipresent, you're all around them. You're totally enmeshed. And then when you're born, it's not that they enter into this great big giant world, but you're still pretty much their everything for some time. And if you sort of zoom out and think about that, you're pretty sacred in that person's life for a short chunk of time. Yeah.
Right. You're the world, right?
Definitely. And it's a shame, here's the thing. And, this is not to say you have to spend every moment of your waking life with your newborn for any amount of time. And everybody's going to choose differently. And some people don't have the luxury of choice. You have to get back to work. You have to make two ends meet. And this is not about one lifestyle or the other. This experience of coming into connection with another human being, witnessing parts of yourself, becoming more aware, going through this process of maturation. This is not exclusive to one lifestyle. This is in the design of motherhood. The spiritual life or this personal growth is the birthright of every human. And I think that in a way, motherhood, regardless of the different scenarios that might play out or different ways motherhood can look, I do think that this personal growth can be implicit in the design.
Yes. It can. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what you just said.
Yeah, it's like we get so caught up on these shoulds and what it should look like. And,
that goes back to the expectation, right? So I think that might be one of the most important points of this episode is expectations from within yourself of what you expect your motherhood to look like, expectations from your partner, your family, your friends, the culture around you. Those can be extremely strong. And there can be a lot of shame and disappointment that women feel because they should do this and it's not happening, right? For whatever reason. And so I think what you're saying is if that's happening to you, this is an opportunity to become aware to let go of that expectation and create something new, right? Like, okay, what is happening and what's realistic and what is going to help me feel good about myself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
Yeah. And it's okay to mourn that expectation. It's okay to have sadness around, I really thought it was going to be this.
Yes.
And it's not. And I'm sad about that.
Yes.
This is not what I thought. It's okay there's no shame in honestly mourning that sense of loss.
There's grief involved with that. When you really wanted a vaginal delivery and had a C-section, you really wanted to breastfeed your child and they're on formula. You really wanted to whatever. You're like, this is what's best for my baby and this is what I want. And it just doesn't always work out that way. So you do have to correct and continue. You have to shift gears, and there's mourning, but there's also I'm kind of releasing that expectation at the same time through this mourning process instead of holding on. I think the holding on is where we really create the most stress for ourselves, which can create anxiety and depression.
Right. And so it's like, is an idea holding me back? I have an idea about how things should have been. Is an idea holding me back from having a different experience? So check in with your ideas, check in with those expectations. And it's not so easy to say, oh, let go of the expectation. We hold on to these things for a long time because we want them so badly to be a certain way. And when we finally, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? When we start taking steps, holding that in awareness and saying, I really did expect it to be this and it's not. And that's devastating for me, and really honoring yourself in that way.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's much easier said than done. But I think that oftentimes ideas can really, really hold us back from our experiences. And we can be stuck in an idea.
Yeah. And the more we can really become aware that it is, it's a hope, it's an idea. If it's no longer really matching our current present circumstances, then it's no longer serving us, right? And it is time to let it go. I think these expectations do serve a purpose, right? They help give us a vision of what we want to create for our future. But things change, and that is a life lesson, right? Is that things need to change and will change whether we want them to or not. And the more we're adaptable to that change is also the resilience that we can see with our mental and emotional and spiritual health.
Absolutely. And that's why I think that the knowledge and the wisdom and the lessons we go through in early motherhood serve us throughout our entire lives. It's like a training ground for very, very weighty lessons.
Yes.
And we learn them in the most personal way, not read in a book, not conceptualized in a lecture, because we're living it. We're integrating it into our very everyday lives, minute by minute. And it really does have a very potent way of seeping into our being. I don't know how else to say it. We integrate it. It's not intellectualized. It's lived. Experiential learning is so powerful. And I think that motherhood is just rich, really, really rich, and filled with tremendous opportunities for learning and development and growth, and really expanding our perceptions, expanding our consciousness, becoming aware of patterns in our lives. So much comes up. And it's not easy, but I do think it's for us. I think it's for the taking. It's for our growth.
It is. And at the end of the day, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Kelly, do you have any last thoughts you want to share with the audience?
No, I think that you're right. I think the big takeaway from this conversation is that idea of conflict being that gap between expectation and reality, and really bringing your awareness to that and how powerful that can be. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Kelly. I really enjoyed going really deep with her on the spiritual evolution that occurs for all women as they transition into motherhood, and all the opportunity that's available to heal yourself as an individual person and woman separate from a mother, but how the transition into motherhood can allow for even a bigger jump in consciousness and growth, thanks to the beautiful babies that we bring into this world, and how we can grow and evolve together with our children into co-creating the next generation. So once again, for more information on Kelly and to check out her book, go to her website at powerfulpostpartum.com.